Welcome to the HMO Property Show. By investors, for investors. Catch us weekly as we discuss all things cash flow positive property investing. Whether you're a seasoned investor, a new landlord, or just curious about property investing, this is the podcast for you. Sponsored by the Co-Living Collective, your trusted partner in creating vibrant and sustainable shared living experiences. Visit us at colivingcollective.com.au to learn more.
Welcome back to the HMO Property Show. Today I have got my friend Mr. Allan Big Al Connelly on the show. Al, welcome back to one of my podcasts. We were on the Perth Entrepreneurs podcast last time, weren't we?
We were, Neil.
Yeah.
It was wonderful, and again, we could have spoken all day.
Yep.
We've done the same thing today. Before the podcast, we've righted the wrongs of the world, and but with a vision.
Yes.
And I think that's the difference. Entrepreneurs, obstacles come all the time for entrepreneurs. It's built into the fabric of being an entrepreneur. Yeah. So, okay, what are we going to do? Right, let's try and spot it quick enough so that it's easy to manoeuvre around it. If something pops up quickly and we can't do that, well, can we go under it? Can we go over it? And maybe can we just go smash straight through?
Let's solve the problem either way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, as you know, my great Australian dream took a bit of a detour. I didn't see it coming, so there wasn't time to avoid it.
Well, I think the listeners have probably guessed that you're not from Australia originally, are you? Where are you from?
So I came to Australia from Blackpool 33 years ago.
Good old Blackpool.
Party
town of England.
However, given my age, just over 60, but I grew up in a Blackpool that had a sense of community, and especially because I grew up in social housing in Blackpool. Now, was there a stigma attached to social housing at the time? Yes, there was.
Yeah.
And
as there is now.
Yeah, as there is now.
Nothing's changed.
Yeah. However, it was a stable roof over my head, and it was a sense of community. And if we needed to borrow a cup of sugar or an egg, we'd go next door and easily borrow it from the neighbour.
Them were the days, weren't they?
Those were the days.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a case of, come payday, you rush round with that cup of sugar or that egg, but you might say, okay, I know you've got overtime on, we'll take the kids in and give them dinner. It was so easy because people looked out for each other. Your
neighbours were kind of like family back in them days, weren't they?
They were,
yeah.
They were.
Your auntie that you called your auntie wasn't really your auntie.
No. No. Yeah, Auntie Doreen,
yeah.
And their children, obviously, with Facebook, whilst it has its challenges and attention seeking, makes you wanting to use it more. That's what it's designed to do. But its other side of it is that you can keep in touch with family and friends far and wide.
It's not the same though, is it? It's not the same as popping round for the bag of sugar or the coffee or just popping in for a cup of tea.
So, because we did that, because of that community, I'm still in touch with people that I lived next door to 50, 60 years ago. And we still remember those times and that sense of community, and we often fondly talk of it. And we, obviously mention that the sense of community is almost non-existent now. And even though I do a lot of work in community, in trying to bring that back together, it's not easy.
And
we use a platform called Nextdoor. It used to be called Nabo. It's an app that you can only talk to people in and around your local area, and it's supposed to be about bringing back that sense of community. However, like you say, online is not the same. So we run Community Cafe. We get people to come down to local coffee shops. So we're supporting local businesses. But the real purpose of it is to get neighbours chatting to neighbours again.
You're like the glue that's bringing everybody back together, right?
And, somebody has to do it.
Yeah.
It's not natural for people to do it by themselves anymore. But when you do it, the outcomes are, incredible. Absolutely incredible. So
yeah, human beings, we thrive social connection, right? We
thrive
on it.
Yeah, that's how we're built.
Yeah. Let's talk about the journey and how you've ended up doing what you're doing, Al, because some of the people that listen to this podcast might not listen to the old one. So we'll talk about the journey and how you've ended up being the co-chair of the WA Alliance to End Homelessness. You're obviously the founder of Community HQ. You got the T-shirt on there, loud and proud, good man. And still the global goodwill ambassador in humanitarianism as well, eh? And there's more titles as well that I could have put on there, isn't there? Why are you so passionate about this, Al? Tell us the journey from Blackpool to sunny Australia.
And I think, Blackpool shaped my entrepreneurial thinking. And, when I was 8 years old, soccer mad as most.
As we are.
Football
mad. Who was your team?
Back then it was Blackpool.
Yeah, right.
Then I followed Alan Ball. Alan Ball moved playing for Blackpool and part of the England, team that won the World Cup. But he got transferred to City and Everton, and he ended up at Arsenal. So I now support Blackpool and Arsenal as my first tier team. Don't hold that against me, please. But, the only team ever to go through a season unbeaten in the Premier League so far. So, they've had their moments, and right now they're having their moments again. It's some
looking good,
cracking football, especially against Newcastle.
Yes,
last week.
Well, I'm glad because I'm a Middlesbrough fan.
But yes, going back to Blackpool, 8 years old, football mad, and wake up in the morning, get the ball all day playing football, and then one day the football burst. Oh, no money to buy a new football. Okay, that's a problem. How do I solve it? I've got a little billy cart at home. I'll put a flat top on it. I'll go and wait at the coach station for the coaches to arrive, and then I'll offer to take the visitors and their luggage on a guided tour to their accommodation, and in return they gave me their loose change. So more than enough money to buy a football and some lollies for all of my mates that came and helped me as well.
That's how the entrepreneurial journey started.
So back then you don't know you're being entrepreneurial.
It's just a hustle, isn't it?
You're just solving a problem. But the basics of entrepreneurism is to solve problems. So that thinking allowed me to start multiple small businesses. Some of them were successful, some of them not so successful. But then there was an opportunity for me to come and visit Australia. Now, I had no intention of leaving England. I had quite a profitable business on the outskirts of London, and just circumstances, it just pushed me in a direction, and I followed my new fiancée out so that she could renew her visa in Australia. And I didn't choose where we were going. That was part of a family thing that they did. So that's how we ended up in Perth. And then, it must be fate because there's a suburb called Connolly and my surname's Connolly. So yes, it must have been meant to be. And we did go and live in Connolly for a while. And that was, went to the video library back then, and what's your name? Allan Connelly. No, what's your name? Allan Connelly. Oh, Connolly lives in Connolly. Yay! Yes. But it was fun, and back then, when I first moved here, again, I had no intentions of really staying, so we weren't looking at buying any property. But we could walk into a real estate agent. We'd pick up a bunch of keys. We'd go and look at the properties. Oh, we'll have this one, please. There was many and abundant properties, and for a very reasonable price.
What year was this, Al?
So we got here in 90, the end of 92, so 93, 94.
Yeah, early 90s, yeah.
Yeah.
God, I was just starting senior school then.
Ah, really? But Australia was just coming out of recession,
right?
And it was picking up, but still lots of properties available. And when we ended up living in Connolly, we upgraded because we'd got settled in our jobs, and I had a small business as well, a franchise business. So we decided that we wanted a swimming pool and a sauna, and moved into Fairway on St Michael's on Fairway in Connolly. Had all of that, and then they put in the dual carriageway. So
Connolly was probably the last suburb on the freeway as well, wasn't it? At that point,
it was at that point.
Yeah.
Joondalup only had a hospital. When we first moved up here, a couple of buildings were starting to be built. The Joondalup City Council wasn't formed then. It's having its 25th year anniversary this year.
Yeah, right.
So we'd been there for 8 years before Joondalup City Council was actually formed. But we did move to a lovely house that backed onto Connolly Golf Course, as you probably know, one of the premier golf courses in Australia. And we were paying $180 a week for a 5-bedroom double-storey house, swimming pool, overlooking the golf course, kangaroos hopping by, the kookaburras used to come and have a barbecue with us, ducks swimming in the pool. That was living the dream.
What was the salary back then?
Oh, I'd easily earn a couple of grand a week.
Yeah, right. So like pocket change to live there.
Pocket change.
Yeah, right.
Why would you want to buy?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was sort of 3 or 4, maybe 4 or 5 years into my journey here. Unfortunately, when you're renting, there is that risk that somebody either wants to sell their property or move back into their property, and that's what happened with that particular property. And at that time, Joondalup was still developing. It didn't have any taverns. The local taverns were the Belden Tavern and the old Mullaloo Tavern, which that was an interesting place, I can assure you. And the franchise, the Moon and Sixpence, went from the city to Woodvale.
Yeah, I did it.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
And they turned the Woodvale Tavern into a Moon and Sixpence.
Right, okay.
The British gravitate towards a good pub, so I could get a pint of Guinness or a pint of Kilkenny. So we moved to Woodvale, and then we decided to raise our children in Woodvale because of good schools, and ended up in a house at the top of the cul-de-sac, and the kids could walk to school. Everything was perfect.
Life was good.
And then we got that whammy, and my wife was diagnosed with cancer. She was only 38, black belt at karate. 37 at the time, but black belt at karate, and given 3 months to live. There's no getting around that obstacle at that present moment, although we really, really did try, and we ended up spending a fortune going overseas, and that's a story for another day. I'm not going to dwell on that.
Yeah.
But it was a horrific time for me, and it led to a slippery slope with my 2 daughters. They were in their 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years, the 2 of them. So impressionable times. Didn't want to move them from their school, so trying to stay in my community. But it took its toll with grief and sole parenting, and then not being able to go back to the contract that I had. Couldn't find work that was suitable. I had my own health challenges, and we became homeless.
Well, so it can happen to anybody, really, can't it?
It can and does happen to anybody.
And I think it's important to have this conversation, because a lot of people think of homelessness as the people that they see in the shop fronts, in the sleeping bags and the trolleys and stuff like that. But as we get more into this, they'll start to understand that these are normal everyday people that are ended up in these circumstances, and listen to your story there, mate, you can see how easy it can happen, right?
And the worst bit about it was I could see it all unfolding in front of me, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. It just, you see that slow motion of disasters happening, and that's what it was like. It was an absolute train wreck. And even afterwards, I was fortunate that my doctor said I should self-admit to a mental health unit because of the stress and I was under at the time. You think then, oh, I've officially hit rock bottom now, I'm going into a mental health unit, oh my God,
But that was your shelter. That was the shelter that you had over your head.
It was. My daughters were being well taken care of with their with family.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to say here might shine a light on, why some of the rough sleepers turn to, drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. Because the first thing they do when you enter the mental health unit is they assess you, and then they give you drugs. And they stand over you whilst you take those drugs. So I'd never had that kind of medication before. I was administered it in a mental health unit.
Well, what kind of drugs were they? To calm you down, or?
Yes. Yeah. Do you have suicidal thoughts? I'm not sure. No, but I don't want this to continue. So, they put me on suicide watch.
Yeah, right.
However, it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because being admitted to mental health unit, doing those assessments, all of a sudden all these social services that are not available to you when you're living the dream, probably quite rightly so, they're all suddenly available to you. So, mental health support, housing support, Centrelink, social support, and because my challenge was a situational challenge, I didn't have a mental health defect. It was just purely situational. So the unit moved heaven and earth to look for accommodation for me and my daughters. And we managed to get into a crisis house in a very lower socioeconomic area, but it was a roof over our heads, and it allowed us to come back together as a family. So it was a godsend. And
what is classed as crisis housing? What is it?
So sometimes the Department of Housing, or Housing and Communities, set aside certain housing for certain ethnic groups or certain mental health situations, and this was for crisis housing specifically for the mental health unit at Joondalup.
Right.
Because obviously they don't really want you to be in the mental health unit long term.
Yeah.
They're trying to rehabilitate you, so it was in their best interest and my best interests to move into the crisis house. But it was in a community that wasn't my community, so I lost all of my community support, and you wouldn't wish anybody to have to go through the social system if they don't have to. So I now understand how tough it is for some of those who don't have a choice. They're born into poverty, or they're born into drugs and alcohol. That is their only support network.
Yeah.
I feel really, really sorry for them.
Me too.
So we talked earlier about that housing continuum, so obviously at one stage I was at the far right of the housing continuum, going to own my own home in a few years. And I liken it to a game of snakes and ladders. You think everything's going perfectly. You're on square 99 and 100s, you've made it. But 99 is that snake that takes you all the way back down to 1 or 2 again.
So you were almost debt-free as well in the house that you lived in?
We were not debt free, but we were managing and living a good lifestyle.
It's all under control.
It was all under control.
Yeah. Okay.
So when you do go back down to, one or two on the snakes and ladders board, sometimes it's, the benefit of hindsight and experience. You can move along quicker up the spectrum, but or the continuum. But being in the system is like being in quicksand. You think you're making progress, but you make one wrong move and you're back into the quicksand.
I remember you telling me this before.
Yeah. So I thought I was going to bounce, that I would be out of that social housing or that crisis housing, back into, private home ownership or the private rental market. However, I had two daughters that I, had to prioritise their welfare as well. The process tried to make me put the girls into the local intake school, which I didn't want to do. They were at impressionable ages. I wanted to leave them with their friends in their normal school. Unfortunately, got the support of the headmasters and the principals, so we managed to keep them there. But I was in the crisis housing system for 5 years.
5 years.
5 years. And it impacted, again, on that mental health, the grief. There is no set way to manage grief and to end grief.
No.
It can creep up on you at the most unexpected moments, and usually in the hours, after hours when people are closed, organisations are closed, there is no support. So you're there in a community by yourself, feeling isolated, lonely. Why me? The community, the wider community at the time, I didn't make any. I didn't try to integrate myself into that community because I wasn't staying.
Felt like an outsider as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I allowed my grief and my anger to eat me up for 3 of those 5 years. That's why it took so long.
Yeah.
And then your health, when you're in that type of grief and thinking, your health starts to deteriorate, and an old car accident that I'd had started to flare up, and once it flares up, it was hard to get under control again. So if you are not sleeping in, your regular bed, and, having your community and your local surroundings around you, it can impact your health forever. If you're sleeping in cars, it doesn't take long for you to get a bad spine. And
it's happening a lot at the minute.
Exactly. So as ratepayers, we have to understand, as taxpayers, we have to understand that when people hit rock bottom, that it is costing us as ratepayers, as taxpayers, because to hospitalise somebody costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
Even worse, if somebody's incarcerated, it costs even more money. So, why don't we bring back that sense of community to try and help these people move through their challenges? I was fortunate, I had, the support of a loving family. I was very resourceful because of my entrepreneurial thinking. But it would have been quite easy for me to throw my hands in the air and just go, that's it, that's my life from now on.
Were you working during the 3 to 5 years that you were in the crisis housing?
So the catch-22 was I'd mainly always worked for myself. And, you're trying to put a resume together. You go into a job and they say, you might have to go through a medical, and I'm thinking, oh my God, mental health unit, bad back, medications. So no, it didn't eventuate. There was no job per se. And the other thing is that the system says you must take any job that's offered to you. If you're on a Centrelink benefit, you must take any job that's offered to you, and that could be sweeping the street. Now, I'm not above sweeping the street, but it wasn't going to get me out of my crisis. Okay, it was actually going to perpetuate my loneliness, poverty, and homelessness, because a crisis house, it can be taken away from you at any moment.
Right.
If you earn $1 over the allowed amount, then it's a crisis house.
Right.
So you're back on your feet.
And then they kick you out.
And then they kick you out, and you
what
become
options have you
homeless
got?
again.
Or have you got the only option there is not the private rental market?
Or go back to couch surfing or sleeping in your car.
Right. So if you earn over a certain dollar figure, you get kicked out of crisis housing, and then you're back on the street.
Absolutely.
And this is the circle that we talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Get a job, earn too much money, get kicked back out. If you don't have a roof over your head, it affects your work.
Yeah.
And then the circle continues. Yeah, the quicksand.
And that's why you've heard me say before, I consider myself one of the lucky ones. I was resourceful, but can you imagine? You've entered the mental health unit. They've cared for you. You're a single person, and you have to leave the mental health unit. You haven't been working a lot of the time, so you're actually put back into the system
After being removed for so long.
And it's hard to actually reintegrate. So, and it's the same with drug and alcohol dependency. You might end up in one of the major hospitals. You've overdosed or something like that. You've been sleeping or staying with a girlfriend, but you end up being discharged to the street again. So again, we're perpetuating these cycles. And I think the reason I've agreed to come on your podcast is to educate community that it's a whole of community solution that's required. They used to say that it takes a village to raise a child, and I truly believe that. I grew up in that kind of environment in Blackpool, in a social housing estate, but that community actually looked after each other. They had each other's backs. So I would love for community to come along for some of the journey. Now that I have got myself back on my feet and I've got a loving partner again, and we're just improving the house that we
got your own house again.
Yeah.
How did you get yourself out then? If it's such a difficult spiral to get out of, how did you manage to get out of it? And then we'll talk about what you're doing now as well, because that all ties into the story that you're telling, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
And understanding the system allowed me to make different choices. So, I'm resourceful. Okay, what can I do to actually get my skill sets up so maybe I can get a job that will get me out of this, and a job that is not just above poverty. So I'm struggling, and the kids are struggling, and blah blah blah, and a decent job. So I started volunteering. One of the first volunteer roles I took on was for a platform called NABO, which was like a Facebook group, but it just allowed people in the local suburb to start chatting to each other. I became the moderator for that group, so it sort of forced me to go out into the wider community and to bring people along on this getting to know neighbour journey. And then I heard their stories. Some of the people who are forced into social housing areas are refugees. In their own country, they were doctors, engineers, professionals. Their children went to private schools, but the political situation in their countries meant that they wanted a better life. Don't we all want that? Isn't that why we came from England?
Yep, absolutely.
For a better life. So how can you blame them for that? But they don't necessarily have English as their first language. Do you know a second language, Neil?
Probably Spanish is probably the second biggest language, isn't it?
Well, do you know? Can you speak Spanish?
Yeah, I know.
The older you get, the harder it is to learn a new language.
Yeah.
So they're here. The only way that they can support themselves and get out of that social housing trap is the same as me. They've got to get a decent job.
Yeah.
But they've got a double whammy. They can not necessarily speak English as well as they need to. And their qualifications aren't necessarily easily transferable to Australian standards, so they've got to go through that process as well. Meantime, their children at the local intake school, they've been used to being privately educated, now they're in the public system. So we're sort of creating a trap for our refugees because we have our social housing all in certain geographical locations and not interdispersed in the community where the wider community rally round and help.
Yeah. And we think about the skill set that then people have as well. Engineers, doctors, nurses, teachers, we need them, don't we?
We're crying out for them, aren't we?
We're crying out for them. And they're using housing now.
Yeah.
So why not use them people with the skill set they've got to give back?
And we
makes sense.
Yeah, and we talked about that the housing system is gridlocked.
Yeah.
So can you imagine if we could move people from social housing along the continuum? That would free up some of that social housing to help that 15-year wait list. And
15-year waitlist social housing, yeah?
Yeah.
And the government are building, 4,000 houses at the minute?
So they'll never, at this rate, get that. The wait list will increase, the timeline will increase until this gridlock is really addressed. So, I know that the solution, everybody thinks the solution is building more houses, and you've come up with
it's easier said than done, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is.
Yeah.
And you would like to do that.
Yeah.
Your organisation would like to do that, but at the same time, there's an opportunity because we build 5-bedroom houses in Western Australia. Even to this day, we're still building 5-bedroom houses when we know that we need more 1-2-bedroom houses interdispersed amongst those 5-bedroom houses.
Especially in the rental pool, yeah? Because
Yes.
80% of renters are singles or couples, aren't they?
Exactly.
Yep.
So, turning a house into a HMO, that could be, a massive impact. And I applaud you for what you do there. I've been a supporter, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
The more that we can make use of those properties, because there's another thing as well. In the planning, the urban planning, obviously along the transport corridors, they're trying to create, medium density, as you're aware. And some people bought those homes because it is close to transport, but they're still big blocks. And now that they've been rezoned, a number of them have decided to cash in on that rezoning. But the only way that anybody who purchases one of those subdivided blocks to maximise their investment is to put a townhouse on there, at least a townhouse.
Yeah.
Which, sometimes if you've lived in a community where there were no townhouses, it were all 5-bedroom, single-storey homes, of course you're going to be a little bit upset if now it looks as though the next door neighbour can, directly look at you in your spa or your swimming pool. So there's pushback from the community to do that. But with a HMO, if you're turning a 5-bedroom home into a HMO, there isn't a necessity to go up. You're just maybe extending very slightly the existing building on the same block of land. So there could be scope there for that back garden that still will be a decent size to become an edible garden for the community. Maybe you could get investors that they do have that social conscience to say, how can we make a difference? So again, that's that entrepreneurial thinking. How do we turn a challenging situation into a plus?
Yep.
So an existing home turned into a HMO, housing now, 5 individuals easily with an edible garden out the back. No 2 stories. The community's got part of the edible garden maybe. Isn't that a win-win?
Yes.
No compromise there. Absolutely. That is win-win. So, telling the stories, making sure that the community hopefully comes along on the journey with us. It could be your granny, it could be your nephews, nieces, it could be even your own children.
Just everyday people
that end up, they have to move out of the area because there's no 1-bedroom homes or accommodation for them. Youth homelessness at this moment is absolutely is one of the fastest growing areas of homelessness. That and females escaping family and domestic violence.
Yeah.
Over 55. So we're not building, homes in the communities that they're used to being in. They're still 5-bedroom home communities. So we are going to have to change our thinking. Is it impacting us? Well, I've just said, if somebody ends up in a mental health unit or in hospital or incarcerated, we are paying for that. If they move into a private rental and there's no cost to the taxpayer for a youth or somebody escaping family domestic violence to move into a private rental.
Exactly. We just need more of them, right? Because I think the vacancy rate at the minute is 0.4%.
And, again, the fact that I'm in the baby boomer era, they are cashed up. They do have superannuation plans, but a lot of them, especially if they've retired, they lived in their family home for 30, 40, 50 years. They want to stay in their local area, but there's no single, or double bedroom apartments in the area, so they hang on to that 5-bedroom home. And I know you're out there
There's only one person, maybe 2 people living in it.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. So there's 2 at first, because normally they're in a couple.
Yeah.
But eventually one of them, passes on. So you're rattling around in this, trying to maintain it. It's costly at the moment to maintain a big 5-bedroom home.
Very.
But they don't want to move for love and money.
I think
even if
some stats out there, isn't there, saying there's something like 12 million empty bedrooms every night in Australia because we've got these 4 and 5-bedroom houses and 1 or 2 people living in them.
And that would solve homelessness every night, wouldn't it? Overnight. I run what we call Community Cafe now as an extension of that NABO platform.
Yep.
Where we get neighbours face to face with neighbours again.
Yeah.
And we go down to the local coffee shop and we support that local coffee shop, and then we just talk.
Yeah.
I do a lot of listening. I hear what's going on. The community cafe runs between 9:30 and 11 on a Thursday, so it attracts people who are not working, people who are retired. What do you think the conversations often turn to? The cost of living crisis, the fact that they can't find somebody to come and do some maintenance in that home that they've had for 30, 40, 50 years is becoming an expensive. I wish I could rent a room or 2 out, but I can't because it'll affect my pension, and I'm stretching my pension as far as I can right now. So again, an innovative solution. We have a fostering children program. Why not foster a nanny? Why not have them live in your home and then maybe contribute to the dynamics of the home by having a new grandparent.
It's not a bad
That's
idea.
one innovative, two innovative solutions I've mentioned in one podcast. So there are many out there. We just need to be thinking and developing them. And in fact, somebody reached out to me on the platform, which is now called Nextdoor, not Neighbour, and just said that they've got a mother's looking after her husband. He's got dementia. She's aged as well. They've got a big house in the Joondalup area. They are willing to provide a room free of charge to somebody if they'll come along and help them, with the husband that's got dementia. So again, another innovative solution.
That's a great idea, yeah.
So she can't charge her because it'll affect their pension, but she can offset it by, a bit of help around the home.
Yeah, I love it. I love what you do with community, mate. The world needs more people like you to bring these people together. We live in Kensington, just around the corner from the office, and been there for probably 18 months now, coming up 2 years. We only speak to two of the neighbours. Yeah. Everybody else, you kind of see them. They get in the car, they go to work, no conversation. Yeah. I go back to my mum's place in Middlesbrough, where we lived there from I was age 16 when we moved in there to age 27 when I left to come here. Yeah. And the neighbours on that street, everybody knows everybody, and someone will have a garden party when it's not raining, obviously. And everybody comes in. So the community in them suburbs back there, like, it's incredible, and it makes a massive difference to everybody.
Street parties, they do have them here as well, but normally in a cul-de-sac. But it takes somebody to organise it.
Exactly.
It doesn't just happen. Somebody's got to get out there and really focus on organising it. And I've just come from a meeting earlier. It was a very good meeting, but we're talking about mobilising community in a different way by having them focus on, it's called ABCD, asset-based community development, not looking what are the shortfalls of the community, but what are the assets of the community? How do we utilise those assets better? And, bringing the community together. So the next event we're just in the very early stages of planning is an intercultural family day, a showcasing of the intercultural foods in the community. So there's a kitchen, people will come in, we've got Second Bite supplying us with food that quite often goes to waste because only a certain amount of it is taken up by the community doing it tough.
Yep.
So we can turn that food into a family day and bring, and the reason I didn't use the word multicultural is because quite often, white privileged people don't consider themselves part of the multicultural community. But when you say, what does it mean to you if I say intercultural?
It's like intertwined.
Yeah.
Which we are. I mean, when you think about it, we weren't born in this country.
No.
So we are guests.
And, because we're English speaking, sometimes it's easy for us to assimilate, but sometimes it's forgotten that we started afresh again. We had to get to know new people, know new neighbours. It's not the same as when you're growing up with somebody for all those years. Yeah. You've got to try and establish it from zero. And now you become a proud dad.
Yes, very proud. I wasn't proud last night when he was crying out loud. But the children bring community together naturally because through school, through sports and things like that. And but if you don't have children, if you are a migrant or a refugee and you're just in a community, whilst we're a multicultural country, we still have these barriers of integration. So we mentioned the pub before, so British males tend to want to go to the pub, but somebody's faith might not want to do that. Yep. So they might congregate at the local Lebanese cafe, for example. And whilst I go to the pub and then go and have my kebab on the way home, and that's not really integration, that's just utilising a service. So let's take
one of those lower socioeconomic areas, Girraween, for example. There's been an attempt to get away from some of the old social habits of being in that area. And when I say that area, Kundula, Girraween, Balga, just happens to have the acronym KGB. Again, it's not a nice connotation, is it?
No.
However, they're only 13 kilometres from the CBD. Who would give their left or right arm to live 13 kilometres from the CBD if the amenities around them were what they were looking for?
Yeah. It could gentrify in the future, right?
Exactly. So the challenge is that if you're labelled lower socioeconomic, quite often you live to your label. That's the only thing that's available to you in that local area. And it's certainly for those 3 years I was living to my label as well. But what if somebody just took on the initiative to say, why don't we start making this place an absolute beautiful, do some gardening, make sure we tidy up, and when people drive down it, just, wow, this is incredible. All of the ethnic, flavours that we have in this area, why don't we open a food hall, and it covers all of the different Sudanese and Vietnamese and Chinese and all, any denomination. But we make it so that people in the surrounding suburbs are not, they're not frightened off because of KGB reputation. They go overseas now and pay tens and tens of thousands of dollars to go to different countries that you've all come from to get your experience.
Yep.
When it's right there on the front door.
Yeah. I would 100% go to that.
Yes.
If that was a thing, I'd 100% try that for the experience, to see how the other cultures live and go about the daily life. It's but at the end of the day, we're all humans, all right.
So we're born into this earth as citizens of this one earth that we have at the moment. Not quite on the moon yet. So we can subscribe to conspiracy theories. We can say that, it's just a natural, evolution of the planet. But the fact is, people are dying. People are losing their homes. You don't be born into this world to just prepare for those eventualities. You're hoping you're going to be a productive member of Earth and look after Mother Earth. That's why they call it Mother Earth, and it nurtures you and you nurture it.
That's it.
And I think the children who are, and certainly your child, they're going to know where their food came from. They're going to be at school growing their veggie patches. They're probably going to, hey, Dad, can I, have a veggie patch at home before they move out? Because they're going to be with you a lot longer. Because getting a deposit together on the average 400, what is it in Perth now, 430,000 or something?
For a unit, For a house, I think we're in the sixes now, aren't we?
There you go.
Yeah.
So 20% deposit.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of saving.
Big money.
Especially when they're apprentices or they're, in jobs that, are not high paying.
Yeah, retail, stuff like that. Yeah.
Working at McDonald's.
Yeah. So like minimum wage earners.
Yeah.
Which is where everybody starts, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
My kids, went and worked at McDonald's and Kmart and all of these places, to get on that treadmill of life.
Yeah. And I think there's some stats out there, isn't it? It used to be 98% of all rentals are unaffordable to people on minimum wage. That's an old statistic. I dare say now, due to the lack of rentals and the price of rentals, I'd say it's 100%.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
So, and I'll move to the Alliance role in a minute.
Yeah.
But, just with that population, okay, we have to have children. You know, we have to populate the planet for the planet to be able to survive. If we stop population, we would eventually implode. Now, you don't set out to have a child that maybe have some form of disability or health challenge, but it happens every single day. Somebody's got the unlucky gene or the unlucky, outcome.
We just talked about my sister before we hit record, right?
Exactly.
She's been in full-time care for 13 years.
So, just the same as ratepayers and taxpayers, we're subsidising people who have to go into mental health or are incarcerated or using, we're subsidising these people who have high needs and special care. But let's think of it as a positive, let's not think of it, my taxpayers' money is going to that such and such over there. Let's see it as, hey, we are contributing so that we can all continue to, be able to raise children and nurture our young and get them to be productive members of society and to experience life. And there's some wonderful organisations out there that do that. And it's sort of, with that volunteering, side of me, to get those skill sets to maybe get a job, that's what led me to doing some advocacy work with the City of Joondalup, and they were doing some work with Shelter WA, and Shelter WA had a sort of a project called the WA Alliance to End Homelessness. It developed a 10-year strategy and talked about ending homelessness, and I wanted to help end homelessness because of obviously my situation.
Yep.
So I started to do a little bit of public talking, and attending some conferences, and the last one I attended in Brisbane was the inaugural Homelessness Summit, standing ovation, because we touched a nerve. We had a room full of people who wanted to end homelessness, but many of them are in organisations, hierarchical type organisations, where they're not necessarily the decision maker. They're all working towards it, but somebody at the top has to press the button. And I know you've experienced that as well with some of your
a few times, yep.
Your efforts.
Yep.
But what I said to them is, stop waiting for permission. Just get out there and beg for forgiveness. Just do it. Be kind to people. We've just, in our community, just started a kindness community, and it's just to get people to think about how they can be kind again. And a good friend of mine, Janine, she runs an organisation called No Limits, do a wonderful job furnishing homes for people who, they've lost their home or they're escaping FDV. They've got nothing. So they fully furnish the home to turn it from a house or an apartment into a home. It's got everything you can require of. Where does it come from? Most of it is donated by the community.
Right.
So that's stopping all of that going into landfill. Somebody's trash is somebody else's treasure, and they don't take trash, by the way. They don't refurbish anything. If it's not suitable and good quality, they won't take it.
So what was that company called?
It's called No Limits.
No Limits.
Yeah.
And people can contact, just look for No Limits online and donate.
No Limits Perth online.
Brilliant, brilliant, mate.
So Janine, the chair there, because they're not for profit, and I met through the Joondalup Wanneroo Ending Homelessness group, and she, I've lost my train of thought here. Just one organisation in the community that is helping the community to help the community. And again, who thought of that?
Yeah, it's a great idea. I was just thinking there, well, we could... I mean, we've got a storage shed full of bits of furniture. I mean, we've brought over 100 odd houses to the market now, all fully furnished, so we've got bits everywhere. I'm just thinking, we could potentially donate half of that furniture to them and make some impact again.
And there's another organisation this side of the river, my good friends Scotty and Dave and Shamini, Ayla it's called, Ayla. They're based in Coburn. They do a charity shop and like a farmer's market, and they help people to furnish houses as well. So Ayla or No Limits Perth.
Beauty. We'll check them out. Let's finish off on the Alliance to End Homelessness and the impact it's having, and where you see anything exciting happening in the next 12 months with it.
So you probably heard, in our lifetime many times, you can't change what you don't measure. So we've been estimating the homeless via the census every 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And I actually ran the team to do the census count for rough sleepers within the city of Joondalup and Wanneroo at the last census count. And we were given special permission to not have to fill in all of the census form, which is quite difficult for somebody who's rough sleeping. But as long as we, and we were under oath to do it, we could count that head as a rough sleeper. So there was a more accurate count in the last census for WA because we weren't in lockdown.
Yeah, true.
However, the rest of the country was in lockdown, and so the census may not have been quite as accurate as it could have been. So what's going to happen when it is accurate? Because the way we did it in Western Australia was well received by the Bureau of Statistics, and it may be a way that they do it in the eastern states. I certainly think it'll be repeated here. It was such a success. So we're getting more accurate numbers of rough sleepers.
What have we got in the way of rough sleepers?
You just go to the census website. I don't repeat those statistics. Some do. 9,000 rough sleepers every night in Western Australia alone. And
what's classed as a rough sleeper?
So a rough sleeper is somebody who they may be sleeping in a tent, they may be sleeping in a doorway, but they really exposed
fixed shelter.
They're really exposed to the elements.
Yeah, okay.
And there is a push nationally now because so many are dying, especially given the extremes of weather that we've, even just recently here in Perth, we've gone through those heat waves. Yeah. Imagine being a rough sleeper and having to endure that. So, no fixed abode, no shelter from the elements per se. But then you've got couch surfers, okay? Then you've got those,
Can we count them accurately?
No, not accurately, no. And, the system makes that happen. If you have a house, it's a social housing, there's no way in the world that you're going to tell the census that, you've got an overcrowded house.
Yeah.
So, that is under the radar, that is guesstimates. But coming back to the Alliance, the Alliance have adopted a methodology from Canada and America, and a housing first methodology that's now been adopted by the state government and really designed to count people who are rough sleeping, and they do that via numerous different mechanisms, but a specific form called a VI SPDAT, which is like a triage form. Mm-hmm. It helps to understand the needs of that individual. So we can track people who are coming into homelessness, people who are exiting homelessness. They may be going into transition housing, They may, because of complex needs, come back into homelessness. But the Housing First model is designed to help those rough sleepers reintegrate into having a roof over their heads, having the responsibility of, paying bills, and when you haven't had that responsibility for numerous years, that's something that you have to relearn. Mm-hmm. And whereas, it might have been easier to survive on a Centrelink pension 10, 20, 30 years ago, it's almost impossible to survive on one of those pensions now. So, it's hard. We're setting people up for failure.
Yeah.
The private rental market is not affordable to anybody who, his income is a benefit of any sort. Mm. So they're forced into social and affordable housing, into crowded accommodation and couch surfing, into cars, and then if they can't maintain the upkeep of that car, then back into rough sleeping.
I started cycling quite a bit, and I'm out early in the morning, 5:30, and there's certain car parks that we drive past in the morning, and the amount of cars in car parks. In fact, South Perth Council have actually installed some barriers now to stop a certain part of the car park being used because it was just getting too overcrowded.
And that story, is prevalent across the board, really. Councils, it's a double-edged sword for them, because the community, reports somebody who's rough sleeping. The first port of call is probably the rangers are sent out there. What are they supposed to do? They're trying to have empathy, because where do you move a rough sleeper onto? There isn't any accommodation for them. That's why they're rough sleeping. So we're just sometimes moving the problem around. The council's not fixing that problem. They're moving it somewhere else.
To a different council.
Yeah, and to a different council, yeah. And, we don't have to... Many of the listeners here today will be, reading the news and listening to, certain podcasts, and it's a challenge out there socially. It's not an easy fix, and whilst we have people doing their damnedest, Minister Carey's trying to do those spot purchases, doing whatever he can. There is that $2.6 billion injection. We've got to believe that somehow we're not continuing to perpetuate the problem, and the Alliance is actually doing the counting part of it. They're helping organisations to gather the data, and then the Alliance is actually utilising that data so that it can lobby for extra funding in certain areas. We are having measurable success. So how can you say you can end homelessness, and how can we have a 10-year strategy to end homelessness, unless there is that measure in there?
Yeah.
So I am going to ask your listeners shamelessly to go to endhomelessnesswa.com, endhomelessnesswa.com. You can sign up for the newsletter, you can subscribe, you can start to understand how the Alliance is working with these by name lists, with the organisations, lobbying for extra funding so that other areas can start to do VI SPDATs and assertive outreach programs, and really starting to look at the problem from that grassroots level.
So with the data that you collect there, Al, as well, do we know how many of these rough sleepers or people that cannot get access to accommodation, do we know if they're working or if they're not working? Have we got that type of data? And the reason
what we do as an Alliance is we make sure that we de-identify any data.
Yeah, that's why you call them the nameless.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
So, that will never be released to any type of organisation or government. It's de-identified.
Yeah, I get you.
But it's still counting.
Yeah.
Okay?
And the reason that I ask is obviously not all of them people need social housing, right? There'll be people there that have got jobs, I've told this story before on the podcast. Again, when I'm riding my bike, there was a couple that used to sleep in an airbed next to the Swan River near Applecross.
Yeah.
Every morning you'd see them there. I don't know whether they're getting a wash in the river or they're getting in there and just having a bit of a swim for a morning dip. But no doubt they had jobs. They just can't find anywhere to live right now.
So right now, and I know this for a fact, okay, that a Butler property, which shall remain nameless, but it was in Butler, 4 or 5 years ago, when it came onto the rental market, there were 2 applications, and they offered lower than the asking price. And because there was only 2 applications, the landlord was locked into taking one of those applications. Yeah. Fast forward, 4 or 5 years, the property becomes vacant again, and 120 people view the property in a 15 to 30 minute window.
Wow.
It was chaos, and multiple applications to lease the property at higher than the asking price. So what a difference. That just shows 120 people in a 15 to 30 minute time slot going through, it was a small property as well, so it was chaos.
Yeah.
So you got the same with your HMOs, you can't get enough of them because there's more demand than there is supply at the moment.
Yeah, and we've got a construction issue. We're just not building enough houses. We've had builders going broke over the last 2-3 years as well.
Yeah.
So is there light at the end of the tunnel now with the data that you're collecting with the Alliance? Do you think ending homelessness is possible?
For certain cohorts, it's very, very close. And the way that the Advanced to Zero methodology works is that you have to have a shift over a period of time towards that ending homelessness for that to be recognised as a move in the right direction. And then for certain cohorts, Geraldton is very close to being able to categorically say it's ended homelessness for a specific cohort. So if we can do it for one cohort, we can expand it and do it for other cohorts. But the focus is on rough sleeping at the moment. That is the biggest expense to us all. And, if we can get them off the streets, there's less complaints from businesses, especially when we're trying to, attract tourism to Perth as a tourist destination. We both travelled extensively. Do we want to end up like San Francisco, for example, where homelessness is just everywhere? Every transport that you take, station, there's homelessness people sleeping in those stations, and there's tent cities and there's whole streets. And
do you think we'll end up like that? Is there a risk of that happening in Perth?
Yes, absolutely there is, because at the end of the day, the beauty is we've got a sprawling metropolis, so there is a lot of places for people to go. We've got beautiful parks, and anybody who is sleeping rough, they're trying to remain under the radar. They know that they'll get moved on if they're they're not careful and blah blah blah. So you will find them in some quite obscure places, but they've got no choice. There's nowhere for them to go. So are we making progress? Yes, we are. Will we end homelessness? Yes, we will, for specific cohorts at a time. Can we do things better? Yes, we can. Your innovative solution, HMOs, it's innovative here in Australia, but it's actually the norm in our own country. A HMO is instantly recognised, whereas you say to somebody here, HMO, they sort of look at you, what you're talking about. Head leases, by local government, why not? Why not bring the private investor who has 80% of the rental market anyway along on the journey?
Yeah. So just so the listeners understand what we're talking about there as well, myself and Al caught up last week, chewed the fat for probably 2 hours again there, didn't we? We've had a good conversation today. It's always good to catch up. But we spoke about the possibility of local councils taking head leases on HMOs to then lease out to people that are on social housing wait lists or need access to affordable housing. You think that could be a possibility, right?
I don't dismiss anything, because of the resourcefulness and the fact that the local, council has a responsibility for their urban planning. Sometimes state government now have said that we need to have infill, especially around high transport areas. That's a local government remit again. Do I see at some stage local government taking on community housing? Yeah, quite possibly. But, it can't be a burden to the ratepayer to do that. And the way that we're structured at the moment, it would be. So we have to be innovative in that thinking again. And, maybe there is a social conscience from some investors as well who they might, quite clearly want to give opportunities to youth or to elderly, and be prepared to maybe not maximise the full return. They may be happy with a smaller return on their investment,
but a long-term lease guaranteed by the government. It's a win-win, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's a win-win-win. Al, thank you again for coming on the podcast, mate. It's
my pleasure.
Always a pleasure to catch up, mate. Hopefully there's some more collaboration in the pipeline for the future, mate, because I think me and you are both very passionate about the same things, aren't we? Big Al, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Most welcome.
Thank you.
Neil.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you tune in the same time next week so you can stay up to date with all cash flow positive property updates.